Hello and welcome to Health Professional Radio. My name is Patrick Reyes, and on today's show we have Dr. Nigel Plummer. He is a world-renowned expert in the field of probiotics, and his research team has published over 80 original scientific papers, including 8 human RCTs, mainly on the microbiome and its manipulation with probiotics. And he has also given lectures globally to health professionals and members of the public on all aspects of nutrition. Welcome to the show, Nigel.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
And can you tell the audience a little bit more about yourself and what it is that you do?
Well, I'm a microbiologist. That's my training. I started off in the pharmaceutical industry, actually. I started working for Pfizer. But many years ago now, I developed an interest in probiotics. In fact, early on, the interest was with animal probiotics and looking at preventing neonatal diarrhea in young pigs and young calves. And that was, that's going back nearly 30 years now. And following the development of those probiotics, which actually worked very well, we then stepped into the arena of looking to make probiotics for humans. And I suppose then comes the long story. I mean, we started to develop a research group. We developed our first range of probiotics, which at that time we used human strains, and at that time that was very innovative. And then as we've gone on, as you said, we've now published 80 papers. We've done 8 or 9 full RCTs now. So yes, it's a big part of our ongoing business. We're also a manufacturer of probiotics, so and fully integrated. So from the fermentation of the bugs that we select and isolate ourselves, so that they're our own strains, right through to the production of finished products. So we're completely embedded in the I suppose probiotic industry, and in a sense. We were the scientific arena has kind of caught us up in the last 10 years. There's been a huge increase in interest in the microbiome, and obviously the publication, if you like, of a detailed view of the microbiome and definition of the microbiome has spurred a huge amount of interest in this subject. So, yeah.
And what was your motivation or your drive when it came to studying and doing research on probiotics?
Well, it was, right at the start, as I say, when I was at Pfizer in the pharmaceutical industry, I was working on antibiotics, and indeed, what we were looking at and what antibiotics and looking at the effectiveness of antibiotics in resolving neonatal diarrhea, as I mentioned, in young pigs and young calves that suffer horribly from very bad diarrhea in the first period after birth and overweaning, and can kill up to 20% of young calves and young pigs. And what we were finding was that antibiotics didn't really, they had some effect, but they certainly didn't resolve the situation, and hence it was apparent at that point that there were other elements lacking, if you like, from the immune protection that these young animals had. And part of that was the establishment of a protective microbiota. And it was that connection, really, from antibiotics through to probiotics, or the use of, or the application of probiotics as a way of replacing or establishing a microbiota, which in that case wasn't there. So that was the first connection, and it became such an interesting area that it just carried on from there.
Who would you say is most likely to benefit from your research?
Well, I think now that there are certain conditions and certain situations where I think there is compelling reasons for the use of probiotics. Let's list one or two of them. I think now we've got to the point where around the use of antibiotics, the use of probiotics as a way of trying to mitigate the very damaging effects that antibiotics have on the intestinal microbiota, I think that those mitigation effects are now are so positive and so consistent that the use of probiotics alongside antibiotics is now, I think, it's such a compelling story. And let me just sort of go into that in a sense. Antibiotics, because most antibiotics are taken orally, and we take in Australia, for instance, there's 26 million scripts of antibiotics that are written every year. That's basically one for every person per year. And antibiotics, all of them really, will have a devastating effect on the small intestinal microbiota, because most antibiotics either pass through that microbiota to be absorbed into the bloodstream, and even if it's a non-absorbable antibiotic, it goes through the small intestine to get to the large intestine. And so antibiotics have a devastating effect on the small intestinal microflora, and it's the small intestinal microflora that we now know is very, very important in terms of the types of attributes that we expect to see from probiotics, for instance. So if we're looking at manipulation of the immune system, most of the immune system in our gut and hence in our body lies in the small intestine, not in the large intestine. Mm-hmm. Most of the intestinal effects that we look for in probiotics are centered on the small intestine, things like gastroenteritis. A lot of IBS symptoms, for instance, are centered in the small intestine rather than the large intestine. And this is where both antibiotics have their negative effect and probiotics have their positive effect. So around antibiotic use, I don't think there's any doubt about the use of probiotics. One other thing that's really important in that, and that is that there is now clear evidence, and one of our clinical trials demonstrated this, clear evidence that the use of probiotics around antibiotics decreases the level of antibiotic resistance in the regrowth flora in the gut. Now, basically what I'm meaning by that is that the use of probiotics alongside antibiotics is the first positive intervention that we know of that has the possibility of decelerating the progression of resistance to antibiotics. Everything else in terms of our efforts to decelerate progression of antibiotic resistance is based upon, if you like, limiting the use of antibiotics. Probiotics offer a proactive intervention in potentially decelerating progression of resistance to antibiotics, and that's a huge thing. The second point that I'd like to mention in terms of absolute compelling evidence for use of probiotics is alongside the birthing process in the neonate. Mm-hmm. Our first microflora is established literally within the birthing process, and because we use antibiotics very much in terms of often it's used as prophylactic for group B strep. There's a lot of antibiotic use alongside the birthing process overall, and what we know is that the disruption of the non-establishment of an optimal microflora during the birthing process potentially has long-term implications on our health, such as much higher risk of developing allergy, much higher risk of developing gastroenteritis and enterocolitis in infancy, and even higher risk of developing weight gain and obesity in later childhood. Now, the use of probiotics at that time around birth, so to the mother during pregnancy and to the baby in the first 6 months of life, again, there's now compelling evidence. Many trials are showing that we can significantly prevent the risk of developing allergy, significantly decrease incidence of gastroenteritis and enterocolitis and so forth. Those two are very, very clear. And really, for anybody who has a dysbiosis alongside things like IBS, anybody who has IBS would really benefit from use of probiotics. And the other one that's really coming through now is that probiotics are a really good regulator and stimulator, if you want to use that term, of our immune system generally. And so there was a meta-analysis published in 2014 showing that the use of probiotics over the winter decreased coughs and colds in adults and in children, and this was a meta-analysis of 20 trials, decreased coughs and colds by 30%. And that's way above meta-analysis for vitamin C, zinc, and echinacea. So probiotics, even for something like coughs and colds, seem to offer a much better solution than some of the things that we would traditionally look for that resolution, as I say, such as vitamin C and zinc. So those are the types of areas now where I think probiotics have profound information, compelling information, and based on solid science. And there'll be more as we move on.
All right. And what would you say is the biggest misconception your clients, your users, or the public have about probiotics that you would like to clear up?
Oh, that's a really interesting one. The misconception. I think that there are I suppose not so much myths, but things that are not truly accurate. I mean, one of the things that I would like to clear up, for instance, is that having, for instance, more strains in a probiotic doesn't necessarily make the probiotic more effective. We've got a culture collection of over 200 strains. We use maybe 10 of those strains from a clinical and from a commercial point of view because they're our very best strains. So it's much better to have, if you like, 1 or 2 really effective strains than, let's say, 15 ineffective strains. I understand where the concept comes from in that, our microbiota is an incredibly complex and rich flora, and we understand that. And so there's almost a natural tendency to say, okay, fine, the more strains that we have, the better it is. And in a sense, I can understand where that logic comes from. But from a practical point of view, having effective strains is better than having lots of ineffective strains. That's, I think, number one. I think the other thing is that just looking at the numbers of what we call colony-forming units, so the potency of a product. If we go back 20 years, probiotics were, I suppose, you'd see probiotics at a level of 1 billion per serving, or 500 million, and a high potency probiotic at that point would be let's say a 5 billion probiotic. What we now know is that typically, it's not always the case, but generally speaking, the higher potency that you have with a probiotic, up to about 25 to 50 billion, you tend to see more consistent and better effects. So what I would say is that what we're seeing now is that, if you like, the range of potency that we like to see physiological and therapeutic effects is in the realm of between 5 and 25 to 30 billion. So we've kind of moved up a scale. And my final thing that I would say, in terms of people choosing a probiotic, whether it's practitioners or whether it's the general public, then what they should be looking for is that the probiotic has supporting evidence that is in the form of randomized controlled trials that have been published and they should be human trials that demonstrate a significant benefit for the condition the practitioner is looking to treat. There's lots and lots of good probiotics out there, but there's a lot of probiotics that really haven't been proven out there as well. So what the practitioner or a member of the general public should be looking for when they're choosing a probiotic is choose a probiotic where there is clear, significant benefits from published, randomized, controlled human trials that show a benefit for the condition that the practitioner is looking to treat. That's the, if you like, number one selection criteria that the practitioner should use.
I see. Now, is there any future or upcoming lectures that you would like people to know about?
Well, yeah, I'm in Australia. I'm in Sydney, and I'm giving a lecture at the big pharmacy show, which is in the Gold Coast, on the Gold Coast, I should say, and that's Saturday this week. And so yeah, if anybody can come along to that, that'll be great.
All right, now before we go ahead and end the segment, let me go ahead and give you one more question. What's a message you'd like to send to our audience for being part of Health Professional Radio today?
A message I'd like to send them in terms of probiotic usage.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I would say that well, if we look globally, probiotics are, I suppose, now undoubtedly the fastest growing category of nutraceuticals in the marketplace, and the reason for that is that over the last 10 years, the importance that we've seen in terms of the microbiome on our physiology and the impact that it has on different parts of our physiology, and the compelling research that probiotics as manipulators of our microbiome make it now, and if you like, the reasoning is clear why there is such growth, and it is because probiotics have been shown now to be beneficial in a number of ways that other nutrients haven't been shown to be, and also areas where orthodox medicine or pharmaceuticals don't really have a role to play or a weapon in their armory. So let me give you an example of that. If you take prevention of allergy, and that can be a lifelong benefit, there isn't anything in the pharmaceutical armory or in the nutritional armory that has been shown to decrease the incidence of allergy in young infants by 50%. Probiotics have been shown to do that on a consistent basis. And I think that's the message that I will send out, that basically probiotics are a major category of nutraceuticals now. And I think we're only just seeing the first generation of probiotics, and we'll see, as years to come, second and third generation products coming through.
All right. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you today, Nigel.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
You're very welcome. And you've been listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Patrick Reyes, and we've been in conversation with Dr. Nigel Plummer, a world-renowned expert in the field of probiotics, as we talked about the benefits of probiotics. If you've missed our conversation or if you'd like to listen to this interview again, transcripts and audio of this program are available at healthprofessionalradio.com.au and also at hpr.fm, and you can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes.